Welcome back, everyone, to another reaction video. Well, a couple of months ago, we took a look at the video from Epic History on the Battle of Verdun. It was actually just the first part of the Battle of Verdun. This is a 300-day battle that saw hundreds of thousands of dead and hundreds of thousands more that were wounded. So they have continued that story now, and we're ready to take a look at part 2 today. This just came out about a week ago, and I'll put the link down in the description if you want to catch up by watching the first part of my reaction. Hopefully you've already watched the original video from Epic History. If you haven't, please make sure you check it out. We want to make sure that we're getting the views and the watch time over there for our original content creators and support what they do, and I am proud to support them as a patron as well. And with that in mind, I want to thank Andreas Christensen for your support on Patreon. I could not do it without people like you. Now more than ever, Patreon means the world. Let's go ahead and dive into this one.
The 21st of February, 1916. 1,000 German guns open fire on French positions around Verdun. These are the opening salvos of one of World War I's deadliest battles.
And yeah, this is kind of a flashback back to the beginning of the battle, and we already talked about a lot of this, so I won't get into any more detail on it right now.
At Verdun, traditional military strategy gives way to the grim logic of attrition. Kill the enemy faster than you lose your own men, and you'll crush his will to fight. The theory will be tested to the limit. Verdun becomes a giant meat grinder.
And this is really what the war has become because of the nature of the Western Front, which starting like around September and October of 1914 has bogged down into this this trench warfare from the Swiss border all the way to the sea. The traditional idea of outmaneuvering your enemy on the battlefield and winning a decisive victory that way is just gone. And it's been replaced, especially in an industrial age, with who can outproduce, who can outkill, who can weaken the enemy to the point where you can finally have that decisive breakthrough.
Consuming 1,000 lives a day for 300 days.
Unreal. Unreal.
The battle will be immortalized for its horror and the extraordinary suffering of troops on both sides.
And as I mentioned in the previous videos about World War I that we've talked about, when you see a lot of these videos of men in combat in World War I, understand that most of them are recreations. They're not original footage. There is footage of men in combat in World War I, but it's very rare. And it's not always necessarily the best looking. Like, you can't always tell. There's a great example of this I think it's the 15th Manchesters, 15th or 16th Manchesters. It's a unit that's charging across the field at Hawthorne Ridge. Jeffrey Malin's shot some footage of it, but it's so hard to even see the men. They're there, but it's not up close like this.
But it is also a dramatic tale of leadership, determination, and heroism against a backdrop of emerging technologies and evolving military doctrines. This is the story of Verdun, 1916.
Oh, there's the fire at Fort Douaumont. Or it was just a really cool animation. There was a fire at Fort Douaumont.
2 months have passed since the initial German attack at Verdun. And by April, the fighting has escalated into the grim battle of attrition that Falkenhayn claims he'd always planned.
We talked about that too.
A multitude of vicious, smaller struggles take place in the ravines, across the slopes, and for every scrap of high ground.
So take a look at some of these areas. For example, Fort Douaumont, Fort Vaux. As I've mentioned before, we are doing a Western Front tour in October. We've still got, I think, about 12 or 14 spots left. We've got close to 30 of us that are going already. And we will be visiting most of the major sites at Verdun. We're visiting Fort Douaumont. We're visiting Fort Vaux. We're visiting the Mort Alm. We're going to visit the Douaumont ossuary.
The high ground is crucial for one main reason: to provide observation points for the heavy guns.
Yep. And eventually, by the time Verdun's over and you're getting into 1917, 1918, this is going to become less important because the advent of air power and the ability to not only get a lot of planes in the air, but to communicate quickly back to the ground important information is going to replace having the high ground for your artillery spotters with having aerial superiority to be able to spot for your artillery. But you're not there yet.
The battlefields of World War I are dominated by artillery.
It's the number one killer in World War I. It's not gas. Gas kills maybe tens of thousands during the entire war. It's not machine guns. It's not small arms. It's artillery.
Raining high explosive and shrapnel shells on the enemy, it is by far the greatest killer. In the first 6 months of the Battle of Verdun, up to 37 million shells are fired. By one
37 million shells in one battle on one relatively small sector of one front in this war.
Estimate, 100 million will be fired by its end.
What does that work out to? 100 million? What are you talking about? 300,000 artillery shells a day in one battle. 300,000 artillery shells in one battle every day.
German guns are the 420mm howitzers, the stationary Gamma-Gerät, and the mobile Minenwerfer-Gerät,
Massive.
better known as Big Bertha. Only 22 are ever built. 13 are sent to Verdun. The Big Bertha weighs 43 metric tons, with a barrel 16 feet long. Its shells weigh more than a ton and have a range of nearly 6 miles. With a
2,000-pound shell being fired 6 miles.
high trajectory and delayed fuse, they can smash through 40 feet of concrete and earth before exploding. Each Big Bertha has a crew of 240 men.
My goodness.
Readying one for action is a mammoth task.
And I should point out, I know these Pickelhaube helmets that you see here on the German soldiers, which are not made of steel. They're made of leather. So they're not necessarily designed for protection. But by 1916, the Germans are replacing those with the very familiar Stahlhelm, the steel helmet, the one that you see not only in World War II, but also in the later parts of World War I.
And once assembled, their rate of fire is just 8 shells per hour. They are triggered by a long lanyard, protecting the crew in case a shell explodes in the barrel.
Yeah, and you have to use like a crane and rope and things like that to load the darn thing, because these shells weigh 2,000 pounds.
And from the concussive shock wave, which can shatter windows 2 miles away.
Yeah, the shockwave's something you don't think about when it comes to artillery too much. You think of explosions and fire and shrapnel. But there are instances where they found men dead. Like they'd come into, say, a bunker, and they'd find 20 dead men in the bunker, and there wouldn't be a scratch on any of them. And here it was actually the concussion from a shell that had killed all of them.
In the early weeks of the battle, the French cannot match the firepower of the Big Berthas. But Pétain does ensure that many more French guns are quickly brought to Verdun.
And there's Philippe Pétain, the one that's very famously in World War II going to become part of the collaboration government, is going to be sentenced to death which will then be commuted because of his old age.
One of their heavier guns is the vintage de Bonge 155mm long cannon, developed in the 1870s.
40-year-old
By the
technology.
outbreak of war, it is considered obsolete, compared to the more mobile and famous French 75.
And why does that matter? 75 is not only much more mobile, and therefore it's much more versatile for you, but it's a lot easier to load and to load quickly. I mean, it's a hand-loading thing. It's not something that takes a huge crew to operate.
But 155s are still used in fortified emplacements around Verdun, and as the battle intensifies, they prove indispensable. Newer versions have metal wheel tracks, which improve mobility over rough ground. The de Bonge is dwarfed by the German heavies, but its lighter shells have a superior range of nearly 8 miles, and faster firing rate of 1 shell per minute.
So you can't out-heavy them. How do you get around that? Well, you become more maneuverable, you have longer range, and you can fire more shells. So you try to make up the difference that way. Especially for the French, they can get away with that because as the Germans are very much on the offensive in many of these sectors, at least during the Battle of Verdun, you don't have to worry as much about breaking through 40 feet of concrete to be able to get at the Germans.
Experienced 5-man crews are capable of exceptional accuracy and specialize in knocking out German artillery with counter-battery fire.
It can almost be called, or only be called murder, but not war. It seems like we are chased out here only to wait for death without being able to move. There's so much incredible writing by men on both sides during this war. Men who are trying to put into words the unimaginable and indescribable horrors that they are experiencing. And poetry is one of the ways, just letters home, journals that they weren't really supposed to be keeping, but many of them did anyway.
Conditions for soldiers at Verdun are nightmarish. The enemy is rarely seen due to incessant shelling. Human remains lie scattered across the blasted landscape. The stench of death drifts across the battlefield.
I mean, there's so many descriptions that we have of the conditions. It looks like the moon pretty much anywhere that artillery's been fired. Look at some of the aerial photographs of sites before and after a battle, and it's just obliterated into just dust and craters. There's nothing left standing anywhere. The smells must have been awful. The sights must have been awful. The psychological nature of the incessant shelling and the smells and the death and the loss and all of it. It just, I can't even begin to wrap my mind around any of it.
The trenches have been flattened by bombardment, so men shelter in craters, linked together to form new makeshift lines. Lucky soldiers find refuge in the battered forts, where there are medical aid posts. Ironically, forts like Douaumont, which the French had considered expendable, hold up well to the shelling.
Yeah. I mean, Douaumont's not only under, so much concrete, it's also underground. They built earth on top of it as well. It's a fascinating place to visit.
But soldiers on both sides are terrified, exhausted, and desperate for food and water. Streams are contaminated, village wells are destroyed, and sickness is rife. The French army is better organized to endure this miserable existence. due to General Pétain's policy of unit rotation.
Yeah, that's
known
brilliant.
as Noria, the water wheel. It ensures French units are regularly withdrawn from the front line.
And this in a time when they're still starting to learn what psychological aspects of the war mean. They still don't really understand things like post-traumatic stress. And they're very harsh at times on what they view as deserters, even though these are guys that are clearly dealing with that. But there are some intelligent moves that are made, like rotating men on the line, but also rotating entire units out of that sector.
Rest, and to prevent their complete physical and psychological destruction. It means about 3/4 of the French army serve at Verdun at one time or another. J'ai fait Verdun. I did Verdun is the expression they use. In contrast, German units are left on the front line for longer, leading to the steady erosion of numbers and morale.
No way it couldn't.
General Pétain is also attentive to logistics.
So a little bit of a foreshadowing here as we're looking ahead to 1918. We're not talking about that obviously in this video, but you see this very distinct looking salient in the line here where the Germans have this bulge going out. That's Saint-Mihiel. And Saint-Mihiel is going to be incredibly important for the United States Army. In September of 1918, it's going to be the first American-led attack, like that's fully an American army, commanded by American generals, led by American divisions. It's not, some American units serving under the British and the French in one of their sectors. And they're going to close off this salient. Their original goal is to go all the way to Metz and cut the rail line, but then they have to cut that short because they have to shift and be ready for the Meuse-Argonne offensive, which is going to happen right over here to the west of Verdun. That's the Meuse River right there, and that forms the right flank of the Meuse-Argonne offensive. I know we Americans usually say Meuse, but yeah, I guess it's Meuse. But yeah, just something to kind of look at there and notice that that's going to become a big factor a couple years from now.
The main French supply route from the south is a scene of constant activity.
The Sacred Way.
As a lifeline for the defense of Verdun, it becomes known as La Voie Sacrée, the Sacred Way.
And you will see signs everywhere there along that road, that modern road that's there for the Sacred Way. So you look at all these trucks, you see how they're lined up. One of them breaks down, they don't stop and try to fix it. They push the darn thing out of the way because this battle is so intense and there's so much going on. And you think about the 300,000 artillery shells a day being fired by both sides. That alone requires a constant stream of supplies. You got to feed these men. And so if a truck breaks down, you just got to get it out of the way because the next one's got to come right on through.
La Voie Sacrée is a conveyor belt, feeding Verdun's insatiable appetite for men, ammunition, and supplies.
100%.
Up to 15,000 tons of supplies and 15,000 troops arrive daily. Army trucks travel night and day, passing every few seconds. Any that break down are simply pushed off the road to keep the route clear. 10,000 laborers work to maintain the road surface.
That's a great point. 10,000 men just to maintain the road. So that shows you how important these supplies are. 10,000 men. That's a division size. Just maintaining this one road that's going through. There's so much in the logistics of all of this that we never think about. It's not just the guys on the front lines. It's the cooks. It's the people building the weapons. It's the people driving the trucks. It's the people laying the rail lines. It's the people getting the supplies where they need to be.
Falkenhayn is increasingly...
Seriously, can we just acknowledge what a bad you-know-what this guy is in this picture? Erich von Falkenhayn. Listen, I know the story doesn't end well for him after Verdun, but he just looks like a mean German soldier in this picture.
Concerned at the scale of German losses. By April, already more than 100,000 men. He even considers breaking off the attack. On the 8th of May, his troops suffer a disaster at Fort Douaumont. An ammunition store catches fire. Flames sweep through the tunnels, killing nearly 700 men.
Unbelievable disaster, and that really did look like the inside of Fort Douaumont. You can go down to, when you go into the fort, it's down kind of on the end, down in the depths on the left side. I'm telling you, Fort Douaumont is unlike anything you've ever seen. It's such a remarkable place to visit. But they have a chapel down there to memorialize those Germans, because it basically became their tomb, because they were incinerated there.
But there are also hard-fought gains for the Germans that month, as they finally take the high ground at Côte 304, then Le Mort Homme.
The dead man at Hill 304. Yeah.
On the French side, General Pétain has overseen a careful, methodical defensive strategy.
So if you ever get the chance, if you check out my channel, Stories of the Great War, we actually walked a field in the area around the Mort Homme and Hill 304. It was just a farmer's field that had just been plowed. And in one stretch of maybe 50 feet, we found several unexploded grenades. We found a grenade launcher, like a launchable grenade from a rifle grenade. We found handheld grenades. Just remarkable that 100 years later, that stuff was just laying there on the top of a farmer's field.
Driving to avoid unnecessary casualties. He is now promoted to command the French Central Army Group. He is succeeded at Verdun by General Robert Nivelle. Nivelle is a proponent of the famous French offensive spirit, and will not be content to merely hold off the Germans.
Verdun has become a symbol. What is its strategic value? Most don't know, but the whole world has its eyes fixed on this single point on the map. That's true.
The French have already made one failed attempt to retake Fort Douaumont. On the 22nd of May, Nivelle oversees a second attempt. After a heavy bombardment, the French advance. Despite heavy losses, one French regiment makes it into the fort. But it is soon cut off by German artillery fire and counterattacks. 1,000 survivors surrender. In total, the attacking French division suffers nearly 50% casualties. Falkenhayn receives new estimates of French losses in the battle so far. They are wildly optimistic.
And this is the case, I think, in most wars. When I was doing my research for my book on Company H of the 20th Ohio in the Civil War, the company commander at the end of the Battle of Shiloh wrote home to the local newspaper that they counted something like 5,000 Confederate dead on the battlefield. The Confederates lost like a third that many dead in the area that he said there were 5,000 men. So, this is just part of the nature of warfare that this happens.
Indicating the French have lost 500,000 men and are losing 3 or 4 men to every German. In fact, German and French losses are much closer.
Which, when you consider the Germans have largely been on the offensive, is pretty remarkable for them that the numbers are so similar. But, I mean, just think about how we're glossing over the fact that that was just a number of nearly 500,000 casualties, and we're just a couple months into this thing.
But Falkenhayn, encouraged that he may be winning the battle of attrition after all, plans fresh attacks. His first objective is the smaller Fort Vaux, which overlooks German supply lines. After a week of fighting through a small valley, German infantry reach the fort on the 2nd of June. 500 French defenders, driven down into the fort's tunnels, endure gas and flamethrower attacks and hand-to-hand fighting in the dark.
So the flamethrower, the Flammenwerfer, as the Germans called it, was used for the first time outside of Ypres in Belgium, and now they're expanding it to the rest of the battlefield.
After 5 days, they run out of water and are forced to surrender. The Germans' next objective is the ridge running from Thiaumont through Fleury to Souville. Souville is one of the last observation points still in French hands east of the river, and the last major defense before Verdun itself. On the 22nd of June, German artillery blasts 100,000 gas shells into this sector, targeting French batteries.
100,000 gas shells into one sector of the Verdun battlefield. And by this point, both sides have developed countermeasures for the gas. The Germans are using a lot of chlorine gas, which is a byproduct of stuff that they have in their industry. But you wear a gas mask and you can protect yourself from that, because chlorine gas, the way that it hurts you is that you inhale it and it causes a chemical reaction that makes it turn into hydrochloric acid in your lungs, which just imagine what hydrochloric acid in your lungs does. But eventually you're going to have other kinds of gas, including mustard gas, which is not just about inhaling. It's about it getting on your skin and getting in your clothes and just nasty.
They use phosgene and diphosgene, deadly new compounds against which French gas masks are only partially effective.
And this is what you do in these wars, is you are using a weapon. The enemy figures out a way to counter that, so then you have to figure out a way to get around the counter, so you're coming up with new gases.
Artillery crews choke despite their masks. French guns in the gas field fall silent. Heavy phosgene lingers into the night, sinking into ravines and shell craters, preventing resupply.
Yeah, it's heavier than air, so it doesn't just float away. It sticks to the ground and moves.
The German assault begins the next day at dawn. They quickly take the Ouvrage de Thiaumont and Fleury village, which will change hands 16 times over the following weeks.
And maybe the most haunting place I've ever stood on planet Earth is Fleury, and we're going to go there on the tour. It's just words cannot describe what it's like to walk the remains of that village.
The Germans are now just 4 miles from Verdun, but this will prove the high watermark of their advance. Nivelle sends a message to his troops. Ils ne passeront pas.
They shall not pass.
They shall not pass.
Now, obviously, the immediate conjuring up with that is Lord of the Rings. You shall not pass. Now, that's not what he says in the book. I think it's you cannot pass in the book. But J.R.R. Tolkien at this time is right over at the Somme, and he's going to participate in the fighting around Thiepval at the Somme. I think he's an artillery observer, so he's well familiar with Ils ne passeront pas.
The French hold the Ouvrage de Froide-Terre, and Fort Souville, the last bastion before Verdun itself, stands firm. In July, the focus of the Western Front suddenly shifts northwest to the River Somme. Here, the British and French unleash their major summer offensive against...
So the British and French each have a sector. You got the Belgians with a sector up here. You got the British running kind of from Ypres in Belgium down to the Somme River. And then from the Somme, the rest of the way, it's mostly French troops. And so the idea at the Somme wasn't even where the British wanted the offensive to be. They wanted it to be up in Ypres. But the Somme is where the British and French lines come together. Well, Verdun, taking so much of the focus for the French, means that the Somme has to become much more British than it originally had intended to be. And that leads, of course, to the deadliest day of the war for the British Army on July 1st.
It's the Germans. The attack has been brought forward to relieve the pressure on Verdun.
Yep.
And both sides have already diverted troops here in anticipation of the battle to come. As the casualties mount, further reinforcements will soon be needed.
It's a sunk cost fallacy. At some point, how many more troops do you pour into an offensive because you've lost so many and you're trying to justify it somehow?
Throughout the year, criticism of Falkenhayn's handling of the war has been mounting.
Yeah.
Finally, in August, he is replaced as Germany's supreme commander by Field Marshal von Hindenburg. He calls off all further attacks at Verdun. The intensity of the battle subsides.
And Hindenburg's been on the Eastern Front to this point, seen a lot of success, him and his partnership with Ludendorff. This is the downward slide toward military dictatorship for the Germans, who effectively are being run by Hindenburg and Ludendorff by the end of the war.
But not for long.
Regiment's Golgotha, physical and mental agony, superhuman exertion, incomprehensible endurance, depression, madness, doom. That was the summer and autumn of 1916 in Verdun. These guys went through.
October 1916. The German threat to Verdun has eased considerably. But General Nivelle, a commander brimming with self-confidence, is determined to recapture the lost forts. It is a question of honor.
Which is exactly what Falkenhayn said that he wanted to happen. He wanted to bite and hold and make these guys exhaust themselves trying to take it back.
On 21st of October, 650 French guns opened fire on the German lines. The French arsenal now includes two huge 400mm rail guns, nicknamed Alsace and Lorraine, the two regions lost to Germany in 1871.
Yep.
Their task is to smash the French forts in German hands. After a two-day bombardment, 6 French divisions advance, supported by a rolling artillery barrage.
So the creeping barrage is something that's technically first used during the Balkan Wars, but it's going to be perfected during the First World War. And basically what it is it's a creeping or rolling barrage. It's timed to go just in front of the advance, and so it keeps the guys' heads pinned down. It keeps them from being able to come up and man their machine guns while your men advance behind it. But it requires incredible amounts of coordination, and there's so many things that can go wrong with it.
400mm shells crash into Fort Douaumont. They penetrate the walls, collapse tunnels, and ignite an ammunition store. The attack on the fort is led by French and Senegalese colonial infantry, specially organized and trained for the assault. These troops finally retake Fort Douaumont and the surrounding villages, though nothing of them now remains.
Yeah. You're taking where the village used to be.
These aerial photographs show Fort Douaumont before the battle and by the time of its recapture.
And this is not unique. This is literally anywhere. Look at the village of Passchendaele in October 1917. Look at the before and after photos. Look those up. It's the moon. It's
a faint outline amid a sea of shell craters and trenches. German soldiers, exhausted and demoralized by long periods at the front, surrender in droves.
They're like, I'm out, I'm done, I'm done.
On the 2nd of November, the French retake Fort Vaux, which the Germans have abandoned. The last major offensive comes on the 15th of December. The French advance another 2 miles, taking thousands more German prisoners. West of the Meuse, the Germans still hold Côte 304 and Le Morte-Homme. But in the east, the front lines are close to where they'd been at the start of the battle, 10 months ago. The Battle of Verdun is finally over. The famous city has been saved, but the cost has been staggering.
Yeah. Those are images, it looks like those are images from the Douaumont Cemetery.
The human cost of the Battle of Verdun is extraordinary. Exact numbers are impossible to establish, but one estimate puts French casualties at 377,000, with more than 40% of those killed. German losses are slightly less, but still vast. The battle's final death toll is around 300,000. On average, 1,000 men killed every day for 300 days.
And the majority of them never recovered, out there on the battlefield somewhere. You got 100,000 or so men's remains in the Douaumont ossuary. You can look into the windows and see the bones piled in rooms. You get tens of thousands more in cemeteries, but most of them, they're just out there, or they were obliterated completely.
And yet neither side has advanced more than 5 miles.
Nope. All for nothing.
Strategically,
for nothing. And that's what's so maddening and yet so fascinating about this war, is that hundreds of thousands of dead to move the front line a couple of miles and then back a couple of miles.
the battle is a failure and defeat for Germany. Falkenhayn's plan to exhaust the French army and break French morale has not worked. In fact, it is Germany's losses in 1916, at Verdun, and the Somme that have real strategic significance.
Yeah.
They greatly increase the pressure on the German army, fighting an enemy with greater resources, to which will soon be added those of the United States. It is the Allied strategy of attrition by land and sea that steadily erodes Germany's ability and will to fight on.
100% true.
For France, Verdun becomes a famous and symbolic victory, a testament to the courage and sacrifice of the poilu, the ordinary French soldier.
And it's places like Verdun, and really, honestly, the whole war. You know, the battles of the Marne, for example. I will not tolerate slander of the French. You know, everybody makes the joke about, oh, they're French. That, you know, the national flag of France is the white flag, you know, that kind of stuff. And a lot of that's built on World War II and the fact that France had this huge army that basically just got outwitted on the battlefield, and that they kind of did roll over and surrender fairly quickly in World War II. But France of World War I, that's not who they are. France fought bravely. They fought viciously. They did the heavy lifting for the Allies in World War I, by far.
For many, it becomes a testament to the madness of war.
Yeah.
More than a century later,
Douaumont.
the landscape still scarred by battle.
Yeah, that's Fort Douaumont right there. That's the parking lot. The entrance is in the back here, but it's a massive complex, several stories inside. Incredible.
Serves as a memorial to the dead of both sides. Douaumont-Ossuary contains the remains of 130,000 unidentified French and German soldiers.
So, take a look. You're seeing maybe half the cemetery here. So all of these graves, and some of these grave markers have 4, 6, 8, 10 names on them. So they're not just individual soldiers. But all of what you see here is part of something like, I don't know, 10 or 15,000 individual graves. And then you multiply that times 10, and that's how many bodies are inside that building in the back, because there's over 100,000 just in that building.
It is now a symbol of reconciliation and shared history between France and Germany.
That's a great point they make. One of the things, because I visited Verdun on my very first trip to Europe when I went there in 2022, and one of the things that really struck me in a powerful way was that idea that they were honoring both sides. You go to places like Fort Douaumont, and they're not just honoring the French, even though it's in France. They honor the Germans who fought there. There's a lot of respect shown to both sides.
No other battleground more starkly reflects the horror and futility of war.
100%. So true. And again, look at all those graves, and then imagine that 10 times that many inside that building. All right, a fantastic job as always by Epic History. I'm going to put a couple of videos up here at the end here. If you want to see some of the sights of Verdun, when I visited the battlefield, you can see some of that firsthand from my visit, see what all of these places look like. And I want to thank Daniel Kevisetter. I apologize, I'm sure that I pronounced your name wrong, but Daniel and then Daniel Erickson as well. Thank you both so much for your support on Patreon. See you again next time. Thanks for watching.